Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? This time, we've got something a little different.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A mix of inspirational stuff,
Yeah.
some writing, and a podcast episode too, both looking at like how faith can shape your day.
Right. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
Even if someone isn't particularly religious.
Totally, totally. What I found fascinating is like the approach, even though it comes from, a spiritual place, it still offers tools anyone can use,
Yeah.
regardless of what they believe.
It's almost like a framework, right? Like you can plug in your own beliefs or even just, your personal goals.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the big ideas that jumped out at me was this concept of treating each day like a gift. The source kind of frames it as experiencing God's grace.
Right, right.
But for someone who isn't coming from that perspective, how do they tap into that fresh start feeling?
I think it's all about recognizing the potential a new day has. Instead of that whole, here we go again,
Yeah.
you're actively choosing to see the possibilities.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. How could this mindset shift impact your own goals? What would change?
Oh, I love that. It's like turning your to-do list into a bunch of exciting opportunities.
Exactly. And speaking of intention, the source really leans into morning prayer for guidance, protection, strength.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, not everyone prays, but that ritual aspect, it's undeniably powerful. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Like, it makes me think of athletes, right? Visualizing their success before a big game.
Yeah.
Even if you don't believe in, a higher power or anything, that time spent setting intentions seems crucial.
Imagine this. You wake up, you've got your coffee, but instead of scrolling on your phone, you spend, say, 5 minutes writing down 3 things you want to achieve that day. How do you think that would shift things for you?
Oh, it's like giving your brain a roadmap instead of letting it wander around aimlessly.
Exactly. Now, we've talked about mindset, but the source also gets into these fruits of the spirit.
Right. Love, joy, peace, patience, all those good things.
And this is where it gets really cool. While these come from religious teachings, they're honestly universal character strengths, don't you think?
Oh, completely.
Just imagine a world where everyone was actively trying to embody these, even a tiny bit more.
Okay, now that's a challenge I can get behind.
Right.
But let's be real. Life isn't all sunshine and rainbows. The source talks about facing challenges with faith, like trusting God to handle worries. How can someone apply that if they don't share that belief?
Instead of relying on a higher power, it's about trusting your own ability to cope, to problem solve. Think of it like building a mental toolkit. What strategies do you rely on when things get tough? What keeps you grounded?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you have any personal go-tos?
One thing that really helps me is just taking a step back, reframing the situation. Often, when we're in the middle of a tough spot, it feels way bigger than it actually is.
So it's about getting some perspective.
Exactly. And sometimes that means asking for help. Friends, family, even a therapist. There's strength in knowing when you need support.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The source also mentions resisting temptation, but I think that goes beyond just avoiding bad things. It's about making choices that actually align with our values, even when they're tough.
It's like that inner battle we all face, right? That slice of cake when you're trying to be healthy. Or taking on yet another project when you're already swamped.
Oh, tell me about it. How do you navigate those tricky spots?
For me, it's about remembering my long-term goals. Will this choice get me closer to them, or is it a distraction?
Ooh, that's a great way to look at it, like having your personal mission statement to guide you.
Exactly.
Now, the source offers some practical tips for a great day, starting with a morning routine, but they frame it around connecting with God.
Right.
But
Yeah.
even without that element, having a routine seems beneficial. What are your thoughts?
Think about it. A morning routine sets the tone for your entire day. Instead of rushing out the door in a frenzy, you're starting intentionally. On a positive note, what could that look like for you?
Maybe some stretching, a little journaling, setting a clear intention. It doesn't need to be complicated, does it?
Not at all. It's about what works for you and making it a habit.
The source also talks about gratitude, which we've touched on a bit. But how do we make that more than just a fluffy concept? That's where I struggle. It's easy to feel grateful when things are good. But what about when you're facing those challenges?
It's about finding those little sparks of good, even in the tough times. It might be the support of a friend, a quiet moment in nature, maybe just the fact that you woke up today.
That's a good reminder. Instead of fixating on what's wrong, we can choose to focus on what's right.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can make a huge difference. Now, the source also talks about reflection, tying it back to prayer. But how could someone who doesn't pray use reflection to improve their days?
That's a great question. I'm really curious to hear what you think about that.
For me, reflection is like taking that time to really process what you've experienced, learn from it, grow, like hitting that pause button on life,
Mm.
asking yourself what's working, what's not, and what can I do differently tomorrow?
Oh, that's a good way to put it. It's almost like debriefing with yourself.
Exactly. And it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be this big, complicated thing. It could be as simple as taking 5 minutes before you go to bed and writing down some thoughts about your day. What were the high points, the low points? What did you learn? What are you grateful for?
It's funny you mentioned that. I used to keep a gratitude journal, like religiously. But then life got busy. You know how it is. I kind of fell out of the habit. But hearing you talk about it, I'm realizing how much I miss it.
Maybe this is the little nudge you need to pick it up again. You never know what you'll discover when you make time to reflect.
You're right. You're right. I'm adding that to my list of things to try this week.
Speaking of trying new things, let's circle back to those practical tips we were talking about earlier. We talked about morning routines, gratitude, but the source also really emphasizes facing challenges with faith.
Right. And for folks who don't necessarily resonate with that kind of language, it's all about building resilience,
Yeah.
developing those coping mechanisms, trusting yourself to get through tough situations.
So it's like having that mental toolkit full of strategies for dealing with stress, anxiety, all that fun stuff life throws our way.
Exactly. And just like with any toolkit, you need a variety of tools, right? Some people find deep breathing exercises really helpful. Others prefer meditation, mindfulness, and some people, physical activity is their go-to for releasing tension.
Yeah, yeah. It's about figuring out what works for you and having a plan, almost like a mental first aid kit for those moments when you feel overwhelmed.
I love that. Being proactive instead of reactive. So important. Instead of waiting for a crisis to hit, take some time and think about what helps you feel grounded, centered. So it's about being prepared.
Exactly. And knowing your triggers. What are those things that tend to send you spiraling, right? Once you know what they are, you can start to create strategies to cope with them.
It's funny, I never thought about it like that, but I definitely have those things. Traffic. Ugh. Rush hour traffic. I swear, it turns me into a different person.
We all have them.
Ah.
Once you know what yours are, you can anticipate them. Make a plan. Maybe it's listening to a calming podcast during your commute or doing some deep breathing exercises, whatever helps you stay calm.
That's a great tip. Definitely going to try that next time I'm stuck on the freeway. But sometimes it feels like those self-soothing techniques just aren't enough, Like when you're dealing with a major life event or like a prolonged period of stress.
You're absolutely right. And in those times, it's important to remember it's okay to ask for help. Whether it's a friend, a family member, a therapist, there's no shame in reaching out when you need support.
I think that's such an important message. There's still so much stigma around mental health. People feel like they have to go through tough times alone.
And it's just not true. We're social creatures. We're wired for connection. Reaching out for help, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
So well said. Okay, so we've talked about building resilience, those coping mechanisms, and seeking support when you need it. But the source also emphasizes resisting temptation. And I think that can apply more broadly, making choices that align with our values and goals, even when it's tough.
That's such a great point because it's not just about avoiding those quote-unquote bad things. It's about being true to ourselves, making decisions that support our well-being.
So it could be as simple as saying no to another glass of wine when you know you have that early meeting, or something bigger like setting boundaries at work, or with a demanding friend.
Absolutely. Recognizing those moments where you're tempted to stray from your path, and then having that courage to make the choice that aligns with what you believe in, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
And that can be so hard, especially these days, with everyone telling us to do more, be more, have more. It's so easy to feel like you're not enough if you're not constantly pushing yourself to the limit.
It's about tuning out that noise.
Right.
And listening to that inner voice that knows what's truly best for you. Prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries to protect your time, your energy.
That's so crucial. It's so easy to get caught up in that whole hustle culture thing. Like we have to be on all the time. But taking time for yourself, that's not selfish. It's essential for your mental health, emotional health, even physical health.
Absolutely. Putting on your own oxygen mask first, right?
Yeah.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
So true. Okay, so we've covered those mindset shifts, practical tips for staying grounded, the importance of making choices aligned with our values. But the source also talks about something else I think it's really powerful, reflection.
Yeah, that power of taking the time to pause, to assess, to learn from everything we experience.
Exactly. It's not just about going through the motions of having a good day. It's about consciously reflecting and using those insights to grow.
To evolve.
Whether it's journaling, meditation, talking to a trusted friend or therapist, or even just taking a few quiet minutes at the end of the day to think about what went well and what could be better. Reflection helps us understand ourselves better, to see our patterns.
And make those adjustments, right? If you notice that you're constantly stressed in certain situations, or that certain activities just drain you, then you can make choices to minimize those stressors or find a different way of doing things.
It's about becoming more self-aware and using that knowledge to create a more fulfilling experience, a more joyful one, too.
I love that. It's like taking ownership of your life and shaping it in a way that feels right for you, aligned with who you are and what you want to experience.
And it's a journey, not a destination. You're always evolving, learning. There's always room to grow. Speaking of growth, I'm curious to dig a little deeper into those practical tips. We've touched on them, but I think it would be helpful to really break them down. Explore how they can be applied in a more secular context. Let's start with the morning routine idea, which the source really emphasizes, as a way to start the day with intention and connect with a higher power.
Right. But even if you don't pray or follow religious rituals, having a structured morning routine, it can be incredibly beneficial.
So, what would a secular morning routine look like?
It could be things like waking up at the same time every day, drinking a glass of water, stretching, maybe some light exercise, taking a few minutes for mindfulness or meditation, setting some intentions for your day.
Doesn't have to be super elaborate, right? Even just 5, 10 minutes of intentional activity can make a difference.
Totally. It's all about finding what works for you and making it a habit. Consistency is key.
The source also talks about gratitude.
hmm
We've touched on it a bit.
And its power to shift your perspective from scarcity to abundance.
Right, right. It's about appreciating what you have, not focusing on what you don't.
And it can be simple. Taking a few moments each day to think about what you're grateful for. Your health, loved ones, maybe a beautiful sunset, a delicious meal, whatever brings you joy.
And the more you practice gratitude, the more you notice those little things, right?
Exactly. You're training your mind to see the good, even when things are challenging.
And that can shift your whole mood, your outlook.
Absolutely. Gratitude's been shown to reduce stress, improve sleep,
Yeah.
boost happiness levels. There's science behind it.
Wow, that's awesome. It's not just a fluffy concept.
Nope, not at all. And it's something everyone can do, no matter your beliefs or what's going on in your life.
Okay, so we've talked about morning routines and gratitude. What about that final tip, reflection?
Yeah, taking that time to really process our experiences, learn from them.
And there are so many ways to do that, right?
Tons. Journaling, meditation, talking to a friend or a therapist, even just those few minutes at the end of the day, thinking about what went well, what could have gone differently.
So it's about making space for self-awareness and growth.
Exactly. A practice that can help you become more intentional and mindful in every part of your life.
I love that. It ties back to the main idea here. Having a great day isn't about chance. It's about choice, making decisions that align with what's important to you, even when it's hard.
And recognizing that you have the power to shape your experience, one day at a time.
Well said. We've covered so much today. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question.
Okay, I'm listening.
Thinking back on everything we've talked about, what's one small action you can take today to create a more positive, more fulfilling experience for yourself?
That's a great thing to ponder as we head into the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we took that moment to think, I asked, what's one small action you can take today to create a more positive, fulfilling experience for yourself?
Yeah, it's easy to get bogged down in the big picture,
Oh, absolutely.
but often it's those tiny steps, those consistent ones that really add up.
Right. It's all about building those habits, right? You don't go from couch potato to marathon runner overnight.
Exactly. And it's the same with our mental and emotional well-being. It's those small daily things that make a difference. Build a more fulfilling life.
Speaking of those daily practices, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier. Finding the good, even when things are rough.
Yeah, that's so key to this whole having a great day thing. Life happens, right? We can't avoid those curveballs.
No, we can't. But the source material really pushes this idea of actively searching for the good, even when you're struggling.
And it's not just about pretending everything's perfect, you
Yeah.
know? It's about training yourself to focus on those little bits of positivity, even in the middle of a challenge.
Okay, but how do you do that? Because honestly, sometimes when I'm stressed, all I see are the problems.
One thing I find really helpful is to think of it like a scavenger hunt. Instead of dwelling on what's wrong, try to find at least 3 things you can appreciate about the situation or the day so far. Anything, big or small.
Ooh, I like that. It's like a game you can play with yourself.
Exactly. And it works. Maybe your commute was a nightmare, but the barista at your coffee shop remembered your order. Or you're feeling swamped at work, but you got a nice email from a coworker. Little things.
It's about shifting your attention, right? Away from what's draining you towards what gives you a little boost.
And the more you do it, the easier it gets. You start to spot those little joys throughout your day. It's like building a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes.
I'm definitely going to try that. I think I get so focused on the negative sometimes, I forget to look for the positive.
We all do. It's normal. But remember, it's a practice, not about being perfect. Some days will be easier than others.
Be kind to yourself, celebrate those small wins.
Exactly. Even just acknowledging that you made the effort, that's a win in itself.
So true. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. Remember, every day might not be perfect, but there's always something good to be found.
It's really up to you what you choose to focus on.
So true. And by using some of the things we've talked about, you can create more of those great days.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
And until next time, keep diving deep and keep seeking out the good.